The video cuts off at the most crucial moment. But it wasn't a camera malfunction, something didn't want us to see what happened next. Rain drummed against the windows of Liam Harper's office, creating a steady rhythm that matched the throbbing in his temples. The clock on his desk read 11:42 p.m., and the bourbon in his glass was running low. 20 years as a detective had taught him one thing: cold cases stayed cold for a reason. Sometimes, that reason was bureaucracy or incompetence. Other times, it was because someone wanted them that way. The woman sitting across from him, Emily Carter, early 30s, with tired eyes that had seen too many sleepless nights, placed an old VHS tape on his desk. The label had yellowed with age, its handwritten date barely legible, June 15, 2004. "I found it while cleaning out Mom's attic," Emily said, her fingers lingering on the plastic case. "It's from the night before Dad disappeared." Liam picked up the tape, turning it over in his hands. The weight felt wrong somehow, like it was heavier than it should be. The police would have viewed this during the initial investigation. They did. Emily's voice cracked slightly. But they said the recording was damaged, just static after a certain point. Mom always insisted there was more to it, but... She trailed off, staring at the rain-streaked window behind him. "But?" Liam prompted, setting his glass aside. "She died last month. Cancer." Emily pulled a crumpled envelope from her purse. "She left this for me. Said I should only open it if I ever found what he left in the walls." The tape was hidden behind old drywall in the attic, wrapped in aluminum foil. Liam raised an eyebrow at that detail. Aluminum foil, the paranoid person's Faraday cage. Whatever was on this tape, George Carter had wanted to protect it from something. Or hide it from someone. "I'll need to digitize this," Liam said, reaching for his phone to call Marcus, an old friend who specialized in video restoration. "The magnetic tape degrades over time. We might only have one shot at viewing it properly." Emily nodded, then hesitated. "There's something else. The night Dad disappeared, there was a blackout in our neighborhood. The police said it was a transformer explosion, but..." She pulled out her phone and showed him a scanned newspaper clipping. "Look at the pattern." The article showed a diagram of the affected area. The power outage had formed an almost perfect circle, with the Carter house at its center. "Could be coincidence," Liam said, but he was already making notes. In 20 years of private investigation, he'd learned that coincidences were often just patterns we hadn't recognized yet. "One more thing." Emily's voice had dropped to almost a whisper. "Since I found the tape, my electronics have been acting strange. TV turns on by itself. Radio picks up voices in the static. And sometimes, when I look at my phone screen or the bathroom mirror, I see." She stopped, shaking her head. "You'll think I'm crazy. Try me. Shadows. Standing behind me. But when I turn around, there's nothing there." Liam had heard a lot of stories in his career. Some were lies, some were delusions, and some, the ones that kept him awake at night, were true in ways that didn't fit neatly into police reports. He had a feeling this case would fall into the third category. "I'll take the case," he said, writing down his standard rate on a notepad before sliding it across the desk. "But I need you to understand something. Sometimes when we dig up the past, we find out why it was buried in the first place. Are you sure you want to know what's on this tape?" Emily's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "Mom's last words to me were, he knew they were coming. I need to know who they were." After Emily left, Liam sat in his office for a long time, staring at the tape on his desk. The rain had stopped, but the silence that followed felt heavy, expectant. He picked up his phone to call Marcus, but the screen was black. Dead battery, probably. He plugged it in, but nothing happened. The desk lamp flickered once, then went out. In the darkness of his office, Liam could have sworn he saw something move in the reflection of his computer monitor. A tall, indistinct figure, standing just behind his chair. He turned around quickly, heart pounding. Nothing there. The lamp came back on as if nothing had happened. His phone's screen lit up with the charging indicator. Liam looked at the tape again. 20 years ago, George Carter had hidden it behind a wall, wrapped in foil. Maybe he had a good reason. But now, like so many times before, curiosity would win out over caution. Liam picked up his phone and dialed Marcus's number. "Hey, it's me. Remember that video restoration equipment you've got? I need a favor. But this time, I think we might want to set up some cameras of our own. Just in case." The line crackled with static, and for a moment, Liam thought he heard something else in the white noise, a whisper, maybe, or the echo of laughter. But that was impossible. Wasn't it? Marcus's workshop was a techie's paradise and a neat freak's nightmare. Vintage equipment competed for space with modern computers, and cables snaked across the floor like electronic ivy. The air smelled of solder and coffee, and the walls were lined with screens of various sizes, some showing color bars, others security camera feeds. "You said this was recorded in 2004. Marcus asked, examining the VHS tape under a bright desk lamp. He was in his 50s, with wire-rimmed glasses and hands that never seemed to stop moving. "The casing looks older. Late 90s, maybe. Could have been recorded over an older tape," Liam suggested, watching as Marcus carefully opened the casing. "Maybe." Marcus frowned. "But look at this." He pointed to the magnetic tape itself. "See these marks? Almost like burn patterns. But that's not possible. Magnetic tape doesn't burn like this." Liam leaned closer. The tape showed strange, symmetrical patterns, like frost on a window. "Can you still read it?" "We'll find out." Marcus began connecting various pieces of equipment. "I've got something new I want to try. It's not just digitization, it can analyze the magnetic patterns themselves, reconstruct partially damaged sections." As Marcus worked, Liam pulled out his notebook and reviewed his notes from the original case file. George Carter, 45, electrical engineer. Last seen by his wife Sarah at approximately 10:30 p.m. on June 15, 2004. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of foul play. The only unusual element was the power outage that affected 6 blocks around their house at 11:17 p.m. "Okay, we're ready," Marcus announced. "I'm routing it through multiple systems for backup. If there's anything to see, we'll catch it." The largest screen flickered to life. The timestamp showed 10:15 p.m., June 15, 2004. The camera was positioned in what appeared to be a home office, showing a desk with a computer monitor and part of a bookshelf. The image quality was typical for the era, slightly fuzzy, with muted colors. George Carter walked into frame. He was a tall man with graying hair, wearing khakis and a blue button-down shirt. His movements were nervous, jerky. He kept glancing at the computer monitor, which appeared to be off. "Can we get audio?" Liam asked. Marcus adjusted some settings. Static-filled sound emerged from the speakers, but beneath it, they could hear Carter's voice. "Have to document this. If anyone finds this tape, they're using the screens. Any reflective surface. They can't come through unless." The audio degraded into noise. "What's wrong with the picture?" Liam pointed to the screen. The image was developing strange artifacts, vertical lines that seemed to pulse in rhythm. "That's not damage," Marcus said, his voice tense. That's being generated by the signal itself. These patterns, they're too regular." On screen, Carter suddenly turned toward his office door. His face showed pure terror. The door began to open. Every screen in Marcus's workshop went black simultaneously. The lights flickered and died. What the hell? Marcus scrambled for his backup power system. That's impossible. Everything's on separate circuits. In the darkness, Liam heard a sound, like static, but somehow wrong. It seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. And in the black glass of the dead screens, he saw something move. A reflection that shouldn't be there. The lights came back on. The screens remained dark. The equipment's fried, Marcus said, checking connections. Every single piece. Even the stuff that wasn't connected to the tape system. He looked at Liam, his face pale. I've never seen anything like this. Liam's phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from Emily. Something's happening at the house. The mirrors. Please come. Pack up what you can salvage, Liam told Marcus. And send me any data you managed to capture before, whatever that was. Liam. Marcus grabbed his arm. That pattern in the tape. I've seen something like it before, in theoretical physics papers. It's similar to what they predict would happen if something passed through from another. Another what? Another dimension of space-time. Marcus laughed nervously. But that's crazy, right? Liam thought about Emily's shadows, about the power outage 20 years ago, about George Carter's last recorded words. They can't come through unless. Unless what? The drive to Emily's house took 20 minutes. The entire way, his car radio produced nothing but static, no matter what station he tried. And sometimes, in the rearview mirror, he thought he saw something in the back seat, a darkness deeper than shadow, a shape that didn't quite match any human form. But he didn't dare turn around to check. He kept his eyes on the road, and tried not to think about what might be watching him through the mirror. Sometimes, he decided, not knowing was better than knowing. But it was too late for that now. Emily's house sat at the end of a quiet suburban street, a two-story colonial that had seen better days. All the exterior lights were on, creating a harsh glare that reflected off the windows like accusing eyes. As Liam pulled into the driveway, he noticed something odd. Every window had been covered from the inside with what looked like aluminum foil. Just like the tape had been wrapped in foil. He found Emily in the living room, systematically taking down or covering every reflective surface. Mirrors lay face down on the floor, and she was in the process of unplugging the television. They're getting clearer, she said without turning around. Her voice was eerily calm. At first they were just shapes, but now I can see details. Features. What kind of features? Nothing human. She finally looked at him, and Liam noticed dark circles under her eyes. Did you watch the tape? We tried. He explained what had happened at Marcus's workshop. As he spoke, he noticed the temperature in the room seemed to be dropping. His breath was starting to fog in the air. Mom's letter, Emily said suddenly. I haven't opened it yet. I was waiting for. She trailed off, moving to a desk drawer. Her hands shook as she removed the envelope. The paper inside was covered in Sarah Carter's hurried handwriting. Emily. If you're reading this, you found the tape. I'm sorry. I should have told you the truth years ago, but I was afraid. Afraid you'd either think I was crazy, or worse, that you'd believe me. Your father wasn't just an electrical engineer. He was working on something classified, something about quantum communications. He said they were trying to send signals through what he called fold space, shortcuts through reality. But something went wrong. The signals came back changed. And something came with them. He said they were like viruses, but instead of infecting computers or bodies, they infected the spaces between things. The places where reality isn't quite solid. Reflections. Screens. Anywhere an image can form. The night he disappeared, he said he'd found a way to trap them, to send them back. But he needed bait. Himself. I've spent 20 years trying to convince myself it wasn't real. That the thing I saw in the mirror that night, reaching for him with too many limbs, was just shock and grief playing tricks on my mind. But every time I see my reflection move a fraction of a second too late, every time I catch a glimpse of something standing behind me that isn't there. There's more. In his study, behind the wallpaper with the blue pattern, he left something. His research notes, and a device. I never had the courage to look at them. Maybe you'll be braver than I was. But Emily, be careful. Don't let them know you can see them. Because once they know you know. They never stop watching. Love. Mom. The lights flickered as Emily finished reading. In the brief moment of darkness, Liam heard that sound again, like static, but with a pattern to it. Almost like words. The study's upstairs, Emily said. It's been locked since that night. Mom never went in there again. Liam's flashlight beam played across the stairs as they ascended. The temperature continued to drop, and that strange static sound grew louder. At the top of the stairs, Emily pointed to a door at the end of the hall. The key shook in her hand as she tried to insert it into the lock. It took 3 attempts before the mechanism finally turned. The study was a time capsule. Everything was exactly as it had been 20 years ago, papers scattered across the desk, coffee cups still half full, now covered in 2 decades of dust. The walls were covered in faded blue wallpaper with a geometric pattern. But something was wrong with the pattern. Liam stepped closer, shining his light on it. The geometrical shapes seemed to shift under his gaze, forming new configurations that hurt his eyes to look at. Here, Emily said, running her fingers along the wall. This section sounds hollow. As they carefully peeled back the wallpaper, Liam's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Found something in the salvaged data. Those patterns in the tape, they're not random. They're coordinates. But not for any space we know. Call me. The wallpaper came away, revealing a metal panel screwed into the wall. Behind it was a cavity containing a leather-bound notebook and what looked like a homemade electrical device, its copper coils dark with age. Emily reached for the notebook, but Liam caught her wrist. Wait, he said. Look. In the brass surface of one of the coils, something was moving. A reflection that shouldn't be there. A tall, spindly shape unfolding itself like a piece of origami made of shadows. And it was looking right at them. Emily screamed. The brass coil shattered, fragments tinkling across the floor like metallic rain. Each piece reflected that same dark shape, multiplying it, until the room seemed full of fractured glimpses of something that shouldn't exist. Liam grabbed the notebook and device, shoving them into his coat. We need to leave. Now. They ran down the hallway, but every reflective surface they passed, picture frames, doorknobs, even the glossy paint on the walls, showed those things moving alongside them, keeping pace. The static sound grew louder, resolving into what might have been words in a language too alien for human tongues. At the bottom of the stairs, Emily's phone rang. The screen showed her own face looking back at her, but the expression was wrong, a twisted smile that stretched too wide. She threw the phone against the wall. The garage, she gasped. Dad's old Volvo is still there. No modern electronics, no screen displays. They made it to the garage just as every light in the house exploded simultaneously. In the darkness, Liam could see them more clearly now, shapes that bent space around them like black holes made of static, moving through every reflection like windows. The Volvo's engine coughed to life on the 3rd try. As they peeled out of the driveway, Liam caught a glimpse of the house in the rearview mirror. Every window blazed with harsh light, and silhouetted against them were dozens of tall, impossibly thin figures, watching them go. He adjusted the mirror away. 20 minutes later, they sat in a 24-hour diner, the notebook open between them. George Carter's handwriting filled page after page, growing more frantic as it went. The quantum transmission experiments are showing anomalous results. Signal decay doesn't match any known pattern. It's like the information isn't being lost, it's being changed. Deliberately. They were trying to create a quantum internet, instantaneous communication through microscopic wormholes in spacetime. But the wormholes went somewhere else. Somewhere wrong. They're like parasites. They live in the spaces between spaces, the quantum foam underlying reality. Our experiments gave them a way in. Now they're spreading through every network device, every digital display, every reflective surface that can hold an image. They feed on observation. Human consciousness is like a battery to them. The more people see them, the stronger they become. But they can only fully manifest when someone acknowledges their existence, when someone looks directly at them and recognizes them as real. I've built a device that might send them back, using the same quantum principles that let them in. But it needs a human consciousness to act as a beacon, to guide them to the right dimensional frequency. Sarah, if you find this, I'm sorry. I couldn't let them spread. They were starting to take people. Replace them with copies that aren't quite right. The man who started the project, Dr. Chen, I saw his reflection moving independently last week. Today, the real Dr. Chen disappeared. I'm going to activate the device tonight. I'll use myself as the beacon. With luck, it will draw them all back through to their own space. If it doesn't work, don't look too long at your reflection. Don't trust screens. And whatever you do, don't let them know you can see them. Because once they know you know, they'll dash. The entry ended there. The next page was blank except for a complex mathematical formula and a diagram of the device they'd found in the wall. Liam's phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus. You need to see this. Analyze the power outage pattern from 2004. It wasn't centered on the house, it was a perfect circle with the house at the edge. The center was half a mile away. There's something there you need to see. Emily looked up from the notebook. We have to finish what Dad started. That formula, the device, it's a blueprint for sending them back. It's a blueprint for sacrificing yourself, Liam countered. Your father used himself as bait. It killed him. Maybe not. Emily's eyes were fever-bright. The letter, the tape, the notebook, he left it all like a trail of breadcrumbs. Why leave instructions if there was no way to survive it? The diner's lights flickered. In the window, Liam saw a reflection that wasn't theirs, a tall, static-filled shape standing at their table. But when he turned, there was nothing there. His phone buzzed one more time. The message was corrupted, showing only random characters, except for coordinates and one clear phrase. Hurry. They're learning. The coordinates led them to an abandoned research facility on the outskirts of town. The building's sign was weather-worn, but Liam could still make out the words, Quantum Tech Solutions, beneath years of grime. The parking lot was cracked, weeds pushing through the asphalt like skeletal fingers. Dad never mentioned this place, Emily said, clutching her father's device. They'd spent an hour studying the notebook, trying to understand the activation sequence. Maybe he couldn't. Liam's flashlight beam played across broken windows. Look at the symbol on that faded sign, it matches the letterhead on your father's notebook. The front door was chained, but a side entrance hung open, its security keypad dark and dead. As they entered, their footsteps echoed through empty corridors. The air smelled of rust and ozone. Liam's phone had stopped working completely. The screen showed only rolling static, occasionally forming patterns that looked disturbingly like faces. They found the main research lab on the second floor. Empty computer terminals lined the walls, their screens dark and dusty. But something was wrong with the dust, it moved in patterns that didn't match the air currents, swirling into complex geometries before settling again. In the center of the room stood a massive apparatus, a ring of metal and wire, resembling the device they'd found in the wall, but industrial scale. And in the middle of the ring. That's impossible, Emily whispered. The air itself seemed to bend and twist, like looking through warped glass. And in that distortion, shapes moved. Tall, fluid shapes that hurt the eyes to look at directly. Your father's notes, Liam said, his voice tight. The quantum transmission experiments didn't just open a door. They opened every reflective surface into their space. But this is the original breach. A sound filled the room, that same static voice, but clearer now. Almost comprehensible. Almost human. The shapes in the distortion were becoming more distinct. More solid. They're not just watching anymore, Emily said. They're coming through. Liam looked around the room. Every screen, every window, every reflective surface showed the same thing, those twisted figures, pressing against the glass like it was a membrane, trying to tear their way through. Emily was connecting her father's device to the larger apparatus, following the diagrams in his notebook. The quantum frequency has to match exactly, she muttered. Too high, and nothing happens. Too low, and... She didn't finish the thought. The static voices grew louder. The shapes in the central distortion were almost fully formed now, beings of pure geometric nightmare, folding through dimensions that shouldn't exist. Emily, Liam said quietly. Your father's device. You said he left instructions like breadcrumbs. What if? He swallowed hard. What if he's still alive? What if he's been trapped in their space for 20 years? Emily's hands froze on the device. Then we can bring him back. Or we could let them all the way in. The temperature in the room plummeted. In every reflection, the figures were moving closer. Watching. Waiting. Emily made the final connection. The device hummed to life, its coils glowing with an inner light that seemed to bend in impossible directions. Dad's formula, she said. It needs a consciousness to target the right frequency. To find the way back. She looked at Liam, her eyes bright with tears. I have to go in. Emily, no. But she was already stepping into the ring. The air around her twisted, reality folding like origami. The static voices rose to a scream. Every screen in the room exploded simultaneously. Through the rain of glass, Liam saw something impossible, reflections breaking free of their surfaces, those twisted figures stepping into our world like smoke solidifying. Emily stood in the center of the ring, her father's device clutched to her chest. Her outline was beginning to blur, as if she was being unwritten from reality itself. I see him, she whispered. He's here. He's been here all along, watching, waiting for someone to. The rest of her words were lost in static. Light exploded from the ring, so bright it burned afterimages into Liam's vision. The temperature dropped so low his breath crystallized in the air. And in that frozen moment, as reality tore itself apart, Liam saw them clearly for the first time, beings made of living mathematics, their geometries an offense to Euclidean space. They reached for Emily with limbs that existed in too many dimensions at once. She looked at Liam one last time. Her smile was sad, knowing. Then she was gone. The light collapsed in on itself. The static voices cut off mid-scream. The twisted figures in the reflections vanished like smoke in wind. Liam found himself alone in a dark room full of broken glass. His phone buzzed. The screen showed a text message from an unknown number. We found the way back. But the door works both ways now. Keep watching the screens. Keep watching your reflection. Because we'll be watching too. E&G. Liam deleted the message. Then he turned off his phone, covered his mirrors, and drove home in a car with an analog dashboard. But sometimes, late at night, he still sees things moving in his darkened windows. And sometimes, when he's almost asleep, he hears static that sounds almost like whispers. They're still out there, in the spaces between spaces, watching through every screen and every reflection. Waiting. And sometimes, if you look too long at your own reflection, you might notice it move just a fraction of a second too late. But by then, of course, it's already too late.